In Colombia, indigenous and human rights organizations denounced an operation carried out by the National Army against alleged irregular groups in the southwest of the country as a new case of false positives. The leader of the Russian delegation to Ukraine said that for the first time, Kiev stated in written terms its willingness to comply with Moscow's main demands. According to UNICEF, surface water is seriously depleted in Jordan by increasing summer temperatures and demands from a growing population and agriculture. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Caracas, Venezuela, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. We begin with the news. Stay with us. In Colombia, indigenous and human rights organizations denounced an operation carried out by the National Army against alleged irregular groups in Putumayo, in the southwest of the country, as a new case of false positives. The human rights coordinating body of the National Organization of Indigenous Peoples of the Colombian Amazon, also known as OPIAC, said in a communique that the operation carried out on Monday, March 28th, in the rural area of Puerto Leguizamo, left 11 people dead, of which at least 9 were civilians who had no relation with the dissidents of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, as later confirmed by officers of the Colombian Army and the government, including Defense Minister Diego Molano. OPIAC denounced that in addition to the massacre and the kidnapping of civilians, an incumbent governor of indigenous district, Didier Hernandez, was assassinated during the operation. The families of the victims, allegedly executed by the Colombian Army, also denounced that they have not been allowed to see their relatives' corpses. In Colombia, after the announcement of the full list of presidential candidates and their respective running mates, the first debate of the vice presidential contestants played out on Wednesday. National media organized the debate as part of the electoral campaign ahead of the upcoming presidential elections set for May 29th. In this context, the National Civil Registry carried out the draw that defines the location of the presidential duos in the electoral card. At the same time, the public authority announced the redesigning of the format for counting the votes, which showed inconsistencies during the elections on March 13th.
We believe that today the historical pact is willing to dialogue with all possible actors in order to be a force for change, a force that bets on life, peace, social justice, human dignity. I still think that we have to transform the neoliberal model that has Colombians suffering from hunger. I still think that we have to transform this model because today humanity is at risk. Facing the environmental crisis means recognizing that there is an industrial model that destroys the big house and needs to be transformed.
Meanwhile, Luis Gilberto Murillo, the vice presidential candidate for the Centro Esperanza coalition, said that the country is waiting for solid proposals based on the new economic and world order.
People are looking for and here it is that we propose practical solutions, and those practical solutions must be based on the new global economic order that exists and one that we have been suggesting, which has to be based on our natural assets.
Brazil's Supreme Federal Court judges 7 anti-environmental laws promoted by the Jair Bolsonaro's government. Among the laws that will be reviewed by the judges is the denominated destruction package that gives way to extractivism in the country, such as the release of pesticides, mining, and relaxation in the requirement of environmental licenses. The initiative includes decisions and omissions on deforestation, permits, and management of environmental funds. According to local sources, there was a 52.9% increase in the deforestation of the Brazilian Amazon rainforest. In addition, activists denounced the approval of almost 1,500 new pesticides. Many of them contained active ingredients that are not permitted in the European Union and are dangerous to human health and the environment. In Peru on Thursday, Congress will debate a motion of censure against Health Minister Hernán Condori for an alleged lack of capacity to hold the post. The initiative was presented by parliamentarians from the opposition party Avanzada País and was supported by 33 parliamentarians from other parties. This debate comes after the head of the Ministry of Health was questioned on 16 March by the National Congress regarding his supposed competence to occupy the post. In this context, analysts believe that this is a new move by the Peruvian right wing to try to destabilize the administration of President Pedro Castillo, who has faced 2 attempts of impeachment against him in 8 months of government for alleged moral incapacity. In Haiti, thousands of people took to the streets to protest against the criminal violence that is hitting the nation. The protesters mobilized along the main thoroughfares of the city of Les Cayes, the country's 3rd largest town. With songs and slogans, demonstrators rejected the government of Prime Minister Ariel Henry and demanded his resignation. During the mobilization, a group of demonstrators invaded the runway of the Les Cayes airport. The incident generated clashes among armed gangs and the army, causing the death of 1 soldier and several wounded by bullets. Official reports indicate that after the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in July 2021, the organized criminal activity increased, affecting the country's economy. And the Cuban government denounced that Washington does not comply with its migratory obligations with the Caribbean nation and uses Cuban travelers for its own interests. Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodríguez Parrilla condemned what he considers a hostile policy on the part of the United States against his country's migrants. Rodríguez insisted that Washington imposes an economic blockade against the island and pressures governments of the region to demand transit visas to Cubans. He also pointed out that the U.S. violates the human rights of Cubans and promotes a destabilizing policy on the island. Washington is failing to grant Cubans the 20,000 visas per year agreed in its bilateral migratory talks with Havana. On Wednesday, the Dominican government announced that it had acquired the majority shares in the island's electricity company Domlec, following discussions that began a year ago with the Canadian-based energy company Emera Incorporated. Dominican Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit, in a radio broadcast, did not disclose the amount being paid for ownership of the utility company, but noted that on several occasions he had expressed publicly the need for his country to take greater control of their energy, the security, and correct a historic wrong, returning Domlec to the ownership of the Dominican people. Skerrit said that the acquisition of Domlec aligns with the country's goals to build resilience in the energy sector through deliberate action to improve energy security and strengthen growth and economic prospects. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. The head of the Russian delegation to the negotiations with Ukraine, Vladimir Medinsky, stated that for the first time, Kiev has put on record its readiness to comply with Moscow's main demands for ending the military conflict. The head of the Russian delegation stated that if these commitments were fulfilled by Ukraine, the threats posed by Ukraine's membership in NATO will be eliminated. Among the proposals made by Kiev during the last round of negotiations were Ukraine's refusal to join NATO in neutral status for the country, as well as to not allow the deployment of foreign military bases and contingents on its territory. Medinsky also assured that although the parties have managed to reach a preliminary agreement on a declaration document, Russia maintains its initial position on Crimea and Donbas. In Russia, the Vice President of the Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, said the world situation requires negotiating a new world financial order. Medvedev said although there are those who do not want to, a new financial order will have to be negotiated, adding that countries with strong and advanced economies, with sound public finances and reliable monetary systems will play a decisive role. The Vice President of the Security Council pointed out that it seems a viable alternative to end the use of the US dollar and euro as the world's main reserves. According to Medvedev, this is the beginning of a new era in which countries of the world are opening up to the use of regional currencies. And the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said Wednesday his country is not violating its gas export contracts by using rubles as payment currency. Ryabkov explained that Russia is just protecting its interests from the tsunami of completely irresponsible sanctions that have shaken the foundations of the international trade and the global financial system. The Deputy Foreign Minister qualified as shameless the responses of Russia's partners to overnight renew their contractual commitments to the Eurasian nation. The Russian official said Russia has always been a very reliable energy supplier and intends to continue in the same spirit, provided its interests and demands are respected and met. And the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Wednesday that peace talks with Ukraine in Istanbul were a positive advance forward.
We estimate the results of the talks that took place yesterday in Istanbul as a positive advance forward. This is not the end result yet, but the fact that Ukrainian negotiators acknowledge the need for a non-nuclear, non-bloc status for Ukraine, acknowledge the need to guarantee their security outside the framework of the North Atlantic Alliance, I consider it to be substantial progress. Just like I consider as progress Ukrainian colleagues understanding that the question of Crimea and Donbass have gotten a final solution.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi held a bilateral meeting. During that meeting, both foreign ministers described as counterproductive the unilateral sanctions imposed by the U.S. and its allies on the Eurasian nation in the context of the Ukrainian conflict. Lavrov stressed his country's interest in continuing to strengthen the solid cooperation mechanisms with China. For his part, Yi said that Chinese-Russian relations overcame the new challenges posed by the profound changes in the international situation, maintained the right course and the sustainable trend of progress. They also agreed on a very positive assessment of the current state of relations between their nations, which are continuing to develop dynamically in the context of an unstable and tense foreign policy situation. And the Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi said on Wednesday that the Cold War mentality and confrontation between blocs must not return to Asia. The Chinese minister made the statement during talks with visiting Pakistani Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi in the context of the one-month-old military conflict in Ukraine. Wang reiterated China's support to Pakistan in safeguarding its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and national dignity, while Qureshi pledged Pakistan's adherence to the two nations' partnership. The two sides also exchanged views on how to deepen bilateral cooperation and on how to solve the Ukraine crisis. The Pakistani Foreign Minister arrived in Tuxi, East China, earlier in the day for the third meeting of the foreign ministers of Afghanistan neighboring countries, scheduled for Wednesday and Thursday. The U.S. President Joe Biden and the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, discussed over the phone on Wednesday additional capabilities to assist the Ukrainian military. The U.S. President reportedly told Zelensky that the United States will provide the Ukrainian government with $500 million in direct aid as Kiev battles the Russian forces. Zelensky also said some 20,000 people are believed to have been killed since the Russian special military operation began on February 14th, although the number of casualties could not be independently verified. The two heads of state also talk about targeted defensive support, a new package of strengthened sanctions, micro-financial and humanitarian assistance. Ukraine and Western powers have cast doubt on Russia's pledge to reduce military activity around the Chernobyl and the capital Kiev, made during face-to-face talks in Istanbul on Tuesday. The U.S. government expects an increase in the arrival of migrants to the country through the southern border. According to officials from the Department of Homeland Security, the arrival of undocumented immigrants from the Mexican border could reach up to 18,000 per day and break the record levels reached in 2021. While the U.S. government evaluates the possibility of deactivating the denominated Title 42 approved by former President Donald Trump, which rejects the entry of people seeking asylum in the nation with the argument of avoiding the spread of COVID-19. Health experts, migrant rights advocates, and some Democrats criticize the fact that despite his promises, President Joe Biden is maintaining restrictive policies. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Surface water is seriously depleted in Jordan by increasing summer temperatures and demands from a growing population in agriculture. According to UNICEF, the main aquifers are decreasing in supply with annual declines of more than 10 meters in some. It's not just surface water. Climate and water expert Duraid Mahanek warns Jordan's future water security is in danger, with supplies which are just a fraction of what is needed. Mahanek also believes it is no longer possible for Jordan to rely on collecting water from traditional sources. The Jordanian government said it's striving to secure sustainable and renewable sources through the implementation of the Aqaba Amman desalination and water transport project, aiming to provide some 300 million cubic meters of desalinated water a year. It is expected to start supplying by the beginning of 2027. And Yemenis are hopeful after Saudi-led coalition announced a ceasefire for the Muslim holy month of Ramadan and to host talks on Yemen's devastating war in the Saudi capital. The week-long discussions in the Saudi capital are hosted by the Six Nation Gulf Cooperation Council headquartered there and include the United Nations envoy Hans Granberg and Washington's Tim Lenderkin.
It was announced by the Saudi-led coalition is a good step on the way to achieving peace and ending the war. We hope that it will be a permanent one, and not only during Ramadan. I wish that the siege on Yemen will be lifted and that the airports would be opened. We have suffered from the horrors of war. Hopefully, the coalition will be sincere in its call for a truce during the month of Ramadan, and hopefully it will go on for the coming years. They have to find a solution and end the war because it has exhausted the Yemeni people.
The Central African Republic's President Faustin Archange Touadéra attends celebrations to mark 1 year in office. During his speech, they highlighted the administration's achievements, especially in the economic and security areas.
Despite this difficult context, we are pleased with the improvement in the national security situation and the resumption of economic activities thanks to the increased strength of the defense and security forces and the support of our Russian and Rwandan allies. I would say that the president's record is positive, first of all in terms of security. At the time, no one could go on to the provinces, but today there is security.
And with less than 10 days to go before Ramadan, the month of fasting for Muslims, Senegal is experiencing an increase in the price of basic products. In January, the ECOWAS and the West African Economic and Monetary Union, the UEMOA, imposed a range of economic and diplomatic measures against Mali, including border closures. The move was meant to deal a blow to Mali's military board, whose intention to remain in power for more years, the regional bloc described as unacceptable. But people in countries like Senegal, which share borders with the nation, are also bearing the brunt. They are not alone. Analysts observe price increases in other West African nations such as Nigeria, Gambia, Guinea, and Burkina Faso. The conflict in Ukraine also sparked a rise in prices of basic goods, particularly those made with wheat or oil.
The authorities have announced a reduction in prices, but there is no follow-up on the market. It will be very difficult during Ramadan under these conditions. In addition, our seas are invaded by foreign boats, and our fishermen cannot go beyond our borders. It is just amazing.
To tell the truth, nothing is accessible nowadays. All foodstuffs are expensive. I used to buy a bag of cabbage for 8,000 CFA francs, but today it costs between 15,000 and 20,000 CFA francs. And this is the case for all products. The fish sellers can testify to this, as soon as their stores are empty. If this situation persists and it is not resolved before Ramadan, we risk cutting the fat with bran.
The authorities.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news break. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.